This is it, Comfort Penguin. Before you know it, this duel is gonna be over, and all I have to do is play this one card.
I'm not gonna let you win so easily. I summon Ultimate Ancient Mecha Giant Super Robot Monkey Team Teenage Hyperforce Mutant Ninja!
Jeez, are Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster names really that long these days?
Yeah, you know what? Screw it. I place one card face down and end my turn.
Now it's my move. I draw. I play Destruction Swordsman Fusion to fuse Buster Blader and Buster Dragon together in order to summon Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman! Now's my chance for an all-out attack.
You played right into my hand.
Say what?
I activate my trap card. Happy birthday! Since it's your birthday today, this card automatically wipes out your life points.
But it's my birthday. Shouldn't that benefit me?
Yay, I win!
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22. And I'm also feeling a slight pain in my lower back. I think I just landed on something. What is that? When I was a kid, I went through a lot of obsessions, but the one that was probably the most impactful on me growing up was Yu-Gi-Oh! It was my introduction to a lot of things. Action shows, anime, monster fights, Dan Green's luscious voice. It's also one of my biggest creative influences. It made me want to tell my own stories, which got me into comics, which got me into drawing, which got me interested in animation, which led me to want to become a filmmaker. None of that happened entirely because of Yu-Gi-Oh!, but it definitely played a huge part in that. Back in the mid-2000s, Cartoon Network used to air a lot of anime that wasn't part of their Toonami block, mostly kids shows, and when I was in 2nd and 3rd grade, they were always scheduled to air on weekdays at 3:30 in the afternoon, around the time I would get home from school. There was Zatch Bell, Bakugan, Rave Master, and a bunch of others, but I would always look forward to watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And especially Yu-Gi-Oh! GX the most. This wasn't just a fad that lasted only a couple months. Today, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a franchise that has its own comics, TV shows, video games, toys, movies, and of course a trading card game that Konami keeps adding needlessly complicated mechanics to. It's still going strong, with tournaments held across the country every year, often featuring scripted duels between characters from each of the different shows, with their respective voice actors performing them live in front of an audience. Yu-Gi-Oh! Means so much to me that I thought it'd be perfect for the subject of this year's birthday video. I've always wanted to talk about it, but the problem is there's so much ground to cover that talking about every single Yu-Gi-Oh! Related thing out there would pretty much be impossible for me to do in just one video. So to make things easier for myself, I'm only going to be covering aspects of the series that affected me personally, whether it be the anime or the card game or anything else. With that said, it's time to duel! Actually, before we do anything, let's look at how it all came to be. Yu-Gi-Oh! Started out as a series of manga written and drawn by Kazuki Takahashi in 1996 for Weekly Shonen Jump, the same magazine that gave us Dragon Ball, One Piece, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and filler cringe. Takahashi had a passion for superheroes and playing games, so he used that as an inspiration. Initially, he wanted to have each chapter of the manga revolve around the characters playing a different game. But the card game, which was originally called Magic and Wizards, proved to be so popular with readers that he decided to make it the primary focus. The manga was filled with a lot of dark and disturbing material, and most of it remained in the first anime series made in the late 90s by Toei Animation. I haven't seen a single episode of this version, only clips of it, and from what I've seen... Yeah, it was pretty twisted. I can only guess that it's because of how dark it was that Season 0, as it's now referred to, was never brought over to the States. But why is it called Season 0? Well, because a second anime was produced by NAS in 2001 that almost completely removed the more messed up elements and was generally more accessible to kids. This is the one that got an English dub, produced by 4Kids, now called 4K Media, and this is the one that made me, my brother, and several of my elementary school friends hooked on Yu-Gi-Oh! But another important factor was the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, which was arguably even more popular than the TV show. The cards were all the same in the anime, while some had different effects to make the game less broken, though it didn't always help. Neither I nor my friends had the best understanding of how to actually play the game when we were kids, but we loved it all the same. I still like collecting cards today, my favorite being Buster Blader, and I actually do know how to play the game now, although I'm more of a casual player. I don't have time to talk about how it works, and I doubt this unlicensed School of Duel DVD is going to help much now. So I'll just link you to TGS Anime's Idiot's Guide to Yu-Gi-Oh! Playlist. He explains the game way better than I ever could. I wasn't just a fan of the card game, but I also had my fair share of Yu-Gi-Oh! Toys. I remember owning a Merrick figure with not so great articulation. I had a feral imp with removable wings. There was that blue eyes shining dragon with lights on the body, and and that one of Obelisk the Tormentor where you could pop his body parts off. Huh. You know, in hindsight, some of these toys were really kinda lame. I doubt they're any better nowadays. Oh snap, those Figmas just gave my wallet a heart attack. Not all of these toys were lame. The ones that were legitimately awesome were the duel discs. This is how the characters would play the card game in the show, and they came in different variations. My favorite was the Duel Academy one from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I was extremely sick on Christmas morning when I got this as a present, like so sick I couldn't even stand up without vomiting. But this definitely helped make me less miserable. There was also a version of it in Japan with red lining on it. Oh, I want to get that so bad. Money sucks. You want to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games? No? Well, too bad, we're doing it. I didn't play a whole bunch of them, but I did have some. In middle school, a friend of mine gave me a couple for Game Boy Advance. One of them, World Championship 2004, was pretty much just the card game in GBA form. And the other one, 7 Trials to Glory, was the same thing, but with a story mode loosely based on the Battle City arc from the show. There was also a GameCube one called the Falsebound Kingdom, which I remember being a turn-based RPG where you battle with monsters from the anime. I would have given a better summary, but we lost the game disc a long time ago. Don't ask how, but I'll just say my brother and I did take extremely good care of our games growing up. I wouldn't get back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Games until Legacy of the Duelist on PS4. The campaign mode is really cool in that it's separated into different chapters, one for each of the main Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows aside from the most recent one, Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. Every chapter is an abridged retelling of the series it represents, and winning a duel rewards you with special cards, as well as duel points that can be used to buy card packs from other characters. Then you can use these cards to build your own dueling deck, and you can use them either in the campaign for different results, or battle with other players online. As Yu-Gi-Oh! Games go, Legacy of the Duelist is great, but I only ever play online using Dawn of a New Era. It's a much more basic fan-made version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Online, and it also has anime variants of certain cards with their own anime-exclusive effects. This did a great job of filling the void in my heart left by the closure of Dueling Network. Until further notice, huh? Yeah, right. This thing's been closed for like 3 years. Anyone who wants to play, feel free to put your usernames in the comments so I can add you. If you don't have Dawn of a New Era, then I'll put a link to its site in the description for you to download. Now I wanted to get all the merchandise and stuff out of the way first because the main topic I want to talk about for this video is the anime, since I've got a feeling that's what some of you are more interested in. Now for this part, I'm mostly going by the English dubs, since that's what I'm more familiar with. And also keep in mind, I haven't fully watched every single show, so some are going to get more focus than others. I'm going to look like such a dork making this video, and chances are, half of my audience isn't going to know what I'm talking about. But whatever. Let's just go ahead and do it. So the plot of the original series is as follows. 5,000 years ago, Egyptian kings competed in games by magically conjuring up monsters to fight each other. But when an evil sorcerer tried to use that magic to destroy the world, a powerful pharaoh sealed it and his spirit inside the Millennium Puzzle, one of the 7 Millennium items, so that it could never be used again. In the present day, these games have been reimagined into a popular card game called Duel Monsters, and Yugi Muto, who embodies the pharaoh's spirit after inheriting and reconstructing the Millennium Puzzle, is chosen by destiny to prevent various foes from bringing back the Shadow Games. Among these foes were Maximilian Pegasus, the creator of Duel Monsters, who used the power of the Millennium Eye to steal people's souls, Merrick Ishtar, a gravekeeper whose spirit was corrupted by the Millennium Rod, Bakura, the sorcerer from the pharaoh's past who's had his spirit locked within the Millennium Ring, and then there were these guys from Season 4, who are just kinda dumb. But Yugi wasn't alone, because on these adventures, he was joined by his friends Joey Wheeler, Tristan Taylor, Taya Gardner, and occasionally his grandpa. Yugi's arch-rival was Seto Kaiba, president and CEO of Kaiba Corps, former Duel Monsters champion, and the man with enough big dick energy to power 17 major cities. It only figures they'd give this role to the same guy who voiced Brock in the Pokemon anime.
I'll just use my trusty frying pan as a drying pan.
Sometimes Yugi and the Pharaoh would switch places, with the spirit taking on Yugi's physical form, turning him into Yami Yugi. Aside from when he's tricked into going on a date with Taya for one episode, the Pharaoh would only come out to play at Duel O'Clock. This leads me into Yu-Gi-Oh's main gimmick, the monster battles. In nearly every episode, a game of Duel Monsters is played between 2 or more of the characters. These duels consisted of characters summoning monster cards to fight with, and activating spell and trap cards to turn the tides in different ways. Actually, spell cards were called magic cards back then. I'm guessing it was changed because Magic the Gathering players were getting annoyed about newcomers using them by mistake. Whether they serve as a means of advancing the plot or filling up runtime, duels were always the highlight of every episode. That classic image of Yugi's Dark Magician facing off against Kaiba's Blue Eyes White Dragon always brings a smile to my face. And every time you think Yugi's gonna give in to the bad guy, he bounces back with something like an Egyptian god or the occasional plot device card that doesn't exist in the real game and is never used in the show again after that. But that's a staple of every Yu-Gi-Oh show at this point. The original series lasted for 5 seasons with over 220 episodes, and while it's really easy to make fun of, I still look back on it fondly. Did every single plotline make sense? No. Were the characters outrageously over the top at times? Absolutely. Was there ever a moment that wasn't repetitive or corny in the slightest? No way. But I could look past that since I always found the premise to be genuinely cool. Every episode had something epic about it, even the bad ones, and I find the relationship between Yugi and the Pharaoh endearing. I like watching these two interact. There's a sincerity and meaningfulness in their conversations, and they both have something to respect about each other. And as silly as they can be, I also latched onto its themes of friendship. I remember owning a DVD of the show that had episodes from the Battle City arc where Merrick hypnotizes Joey and forces him and Yugi into a duel. They're both chained up to an anchor, and whoever loses the duel gets pulled into the ocean and drowns. Did I mention Merrick was insane? But when Yugi lets himself lose, Joey breaks from Merrick's spell and saves him, showing that the bonds of friendship are stronger than any force. Ignoring how cliched and unrealistic it is, as a kid, I thought it was magical. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was often considered to be a Pokemon ripoff since it didn't get big in the US until after Pokemon was already a thing. But I don't think that's a fair claim. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was something entirely of its own. It told an epic story revolving around Egyptian mythology. The main character's goal wasn't to become the best at something, it was to protect the world from the forces of evil and build up the courage needed to do so. The bad guys he faced weren't comical villains with flamboyant personalities. Not all of them anyway. They were wicked beings with dark powers fueled by anger and vengeance, and most of them, I repeat, most of them, were legitimately intimidating. But obviously I can't talk about the English dub without bringing up the edits. Oh boy, the edits. FCC regulations for kids shows back in the day were fiercely strict, and this infamously affected a lot of 4Kids programming, Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially. It couldn't show blood, guns, alcohol, religious symbols, English apparently, and in Yu-Gi-Oh's case, the concept of death was completely omitted. Yep, nobody dies in Yu-Gi-Oh! They just get sent to the Shadow Realm. Which, in a way, is actually kind of worse, but at least we got some great memes out of it. They even had to edit how the cards looked in the show. They weren't allowed to use the real card game layout because of advertising laws or something, but in the context of the show's world, how are the characters supposed to know the names and effects of their cards when the text isn't even printed on the cards themselves? Even as a kid, I found that weird. I'll give 4Kids the benefit of the doubt. They made some weird changes, but they were just doing their jobs. And I get why they wouldn't want to push the card game too much. I mean, I wouldn't want episodes of my favorite shows to be nothing but blatant advertisements. That's what Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie is for.
I desperately wanted to see this movie when it came out in 2004, not just for the novelty of seeing Yu-Gi-Oh! On the big screen, but also for the free Yu-Gi-Oh! Card that came with every ticket purchase. I didn't go, unfortunately, but I did get it later on DVD, and thankfully it also came with a card. I still have it, but it's not exactly in the best shape. Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie, also known as Pyramid of Light, is definitely an hour-and-a-half long commercial, and it must have been treated as such by the people who made it because it's neither canon or coherent.
Yugi, we've only got one chance left!
Who the hell is that? Was that supposed to be Yami?
Yugi, we've only got one chance left!
Good God, that sounds more like Peppy Hare, doesn't it?
Yugi, we've only got one chance left!
Anubis, the Egyptian Lord of the Dead, returns to get revenge on the Pharaoh for stopping him from using the power of the Shadow Games to destroy all life on Earth. Which is almost note for note what Bakura's plan was, but Anubis sealed his soul in the Pyramid of Light, and that's why he wasn't involved in any of that. He was never referenced in the show before the movie, he's never referenced in the show after the movie, so his connection with the Pharaoh doesn't carry a lot of dramatic weight. Even as a standalone movie, very little is known about him except for the fact that he's evil, and he doesn't like the Pharaoh. He has a cool design, but not many other aspects of Anubis' character are very interesting.
Honestly, I'd rather listen to Yami Yugi do an anti-drug PSA than sit through any more of Anubis' speeches.
I know marijuana is harmful. I know it can't improve my game. I wouldn't be the world's best duelist if I smoked marijuana. I will never dishonor myself or my friends by using drugs. That's playing a game I can't win. Honor. My anti-drug.
I was only kidding. I didn't think that was real.
The other subplot focuses on Kaiba as he desperately wants to find a strategy that can win against Yugi's Egyptian god cards. This involves banishing them during a duel and then using a trap card called Return from the Different Dimension to summon them onto his side of the field. Not a bad plan, but there's just one problem. Return from the Different Dimension only lets you summon your own banished monsters, so he wouldn't be able to use the god cards at all. It makes more sense if you know how to play the card game. So anyway, I don't really enjoy the Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie as much as I used to, but there are a couple upsides to it. Even though it's made primarily for the fans, it gives newcomers some decent backstory on the Shadow Games, the Pharaoh's spirit, and how Yugi became the king of games. While the story as a whole may be convoluted and illogical in places, I seriously think anyone who's never seen the show can easily latch on to certain elements. Also, this movie was released theatrically through Warner Brothers Pictures, and since 4Kids didn't have to worry about those pesky FCC numbnuts when dubbing it, they could keep the edgier stuff in. The words death and kill are brought up a couple times. There's a scene where the gang fights off a horde of zombies. We even see the Pharaoh get stabbed by one of Kaiba's monsters. It's in silhouette and it doesn't show any blood, but when I was younger, that was really shocking.
What's even more shocking is the review scores. For a while, Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie was the lowest rated animated film on both Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic. Then Hollywood just completely gave up and was rightfully punished for it. The mid-2000s, for me, was the best time to be a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan. Then, one day, as I was sitting through commercials while randomly watching TV, I came across a bumper for a new Yu-Gi-Oh! Series that was coming. My mind was blown to bits. Yep, just like that. I feel bad for having Mom clean up afterwards.
Despite me having such a huge soft spot for the original series, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX was the one I have the most memories with. When it aired on Cartoon Network in 2005, I made sure to watch it every time it was on. 10 years after the events of the original Yu-Gi-Oh!, Jaden Yuki is enrolled into Duel Academy, a school dedicated to teaching students the basics and fundamentals of duel monsters. Oh god, it's a high school anime, isn't it? Well, not entirely. It does have some high school anime cliches, and most of the time it can be pretty cringy, but it never forgets that it's a Yu-Gi-Oh! Show first and foremost. Jaden was such a cool character to me. He had this laid-back attitude and extreme sense of confidence I really liked, and his dueling deck was made up of superheroes with unique designs, and they could all fuse together to create even stronger monsters. I still like him, but the more I look back on GX, the more I start to notice how much of a product of the time Jaden really was, especially in the English dub. The way he said things like bro and dude and throw down a face down, he was just one cowabunga away from officially becoming a Ninja Turtle. Hey, wait a minute. Yeah, when 4Kids handled the localization for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows, fans might agree that GX was probably the most Americanized. The music had a very punk rock sound to it, almost all the characters' names were changed, and I remember there being a lot of weird pop culture references too. One episode has Jaden duel against a kid named Belowski, who 4Kids decided to turn into a parody of the dude from The Big Lebowski. Because kids are gonna get that. Then there was another episode featuring a group of villains called the Dark Scorpions, and their leader was made into a caricature of Christopher Walken?
Yes, quite soundly. Now, children, get to bed. And it is done. All the spirit keys are ours. I rounded up some suspects to help get to the bottom of this most serious crime.
Actually, I am totally cool with this.
I gotta have more cowbell.
Stereotypes aside, I also noticed aspects of the series that sort of make it feel like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fanfiction. Jaden has his own Karibo that he gets from Yugi in the first episode. There's an arc revolving around the Sacred Beast cards, which are basically evil versions of the Egyptian god cards. There's even an episode where Jaden duels against the Dark Magician Girl. Not somebody dressed up as Dark Magician Girl, but the actual Dark Magician Girl. That'd be like if they made Kaiba into a monster and had him duel against Jaden. Oh yeah, that happened too. Why does Yu-Gi-Oh! Have to be so weird? If there's anything about GX that I can really come to appreciate it for, it's how it genuinely felt like it was part of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Universe. Or the Yugiverse. Yu-Gi-Oh! Into the Yugiverse. It references events that took place in the original series. There's a couple episodes where the characters go to Yugi's hometown. Pegasus hires one of Jaden's friends to be an artist for his company. It's little things like this that brings it closer and closer to home for me. One episode that perfectly represents this is the King of Copycats. Yugi's deck is being shown off at the school, and a student named Dimitri steals it, hoping it'll make him the greatest duelist in the world. So Jaden decides to take him on in order to get it back. It's a pretty simple setup, but as a kid, this was really special to me. There's a nice message about putting your faith in your own deck, and not only does the episode use musical cues from the original show when Yugi's deck is seen in action, but Dimitri even calls Yugi's spell cards magic cards. That's some nice attention to detail. Plus, it was the closest we'd ever get at the time to seeing Jaden go up against Yugi. If only we'd gotten Season 4 in the States, then we could have seen it happen for real. Okay, this has been bothering me for years, and now I just have to vent my frustration. So, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX ran for 4 seasons with around 180 episodes, but the last episode of Season 3 and the entirety of Season 4 were never officially dubbed in English. As far as I know, this is either because 4Kids wanted to get started on Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds as soon as possible, or they were forced by Konami and TV Tokyo to abandon it entirely. I'm going to assume it was the latter, and here's why. Season 3 ends with Jaden trapped in another dimension dueling against Yubel, the corrupted spirit of a card he designed as a child. The duel ends with Jaden using a card called Super Polymerization to fuse his soul with Yubel's. It's a different dimension, so
just go with it.
Then when the episode ends, we don't see Jaden make it back to Earth, and we're just left to believe that he died. I feel like this was 4Kids' way of getting back at TV Tokyo for making them scrap the rest of their work. If so, then I guess it's pretty funny for the dark humor, but as a result, it ends the show rather abruptly, and it's still kinda jarring. Thanks to the internet, I got to see the 4th season with English subtitles. I usually prefer watching the dub, but this was worth it.
You scrub!
Compared to Season 3, I don't remember it having a really big story arc, but Jaden's duel with Yugi in the last 2 episodes is easily the season's highlight. It's so much fun to see him fight his way around Yugi's strategies, but Things get real once the Pharaoh takes over and uses one of Jaden's cards to bring out Slifer the Sky Dragon. Oh my god. We never see who exactly won the duel, but I have a better question. How was adult Yugi able to send Jaden back in time to duel his younger self? Is that just a side effect of puberty in Japan?
At some point during the start of my middle school years, my Yu-Gi-Oh! Obsession started to dip. I was still interested in the card game, but after Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, I sort of fell out of tune with the anime side of things, so I completely skipped out on Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds when it started. Even nowadays, I don't really keep up with any of the new shows that come out. I catch them in pieces, just not in their entirety. But I guess I should mention them for the hell of it.
In the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, Yusei Fudo is an underground duelist who prefers to play his card games on motorcycles, which is probably the most impractical way to ever play a card game. As an adult, I've only caught about a quarter of the first season on Hulu, so I'm not too familiar with certain plot points like the Earthbound Immortals or things like that. I know that Yusei and 4 of his friends have the ability to harness the power of a creature called the Crimson Dragon, and I know that something happened to his father when he was a child, but my recollection of 5Ds doesn't go too far beyond that. It was pretty enjoyable from what I've seen. The setting and tone are a nice change of pace from the brighter, more comedic feel of GX. Yusei's a likable character, and while the concept of card games on motorcycles has been the butt of countless internet jokes over the years, it's definitely a unique concept that adds a little more thrill and tension to the duels. Not to say Yusei doesn't use a duel disk like normal, because he does, particularly in the film Bonds Beyond Time. This was made in celebration of the 10th anniversary of the anime's launch. It was the one Yu-Gi-Oh! Related thing I remember watching right after my GX days, and it was a pretty cool way to celebrate. Yugi, Jaden, and Yusei team up to stop a villain called Paradox from traveling through time to prevent the creation of duel monsters, because apparently it's going to destroy the world in the future. To stop this, Paradox plans on killing Pegasus years after he already created the game. Why doesn't he just go back in time to kill him before he made the game? And if Paradox blames duel monsters for the destruction of the world, why does he still carry a deck and a duel disk with him? Clearly he's a duelist himself, so does that make him part of the problem?
You're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Yeah, a lot of things about this movie really don't make any sense, but that doesn't matter. Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans wanted to see the 3 main characters for the time come together and play card games side by side, and that's exactly what we got. Back then, it was great to see Yugi and Jaden again years after their shows ended, but I imagine American fans might have been confused about Jaden's appearance. He says his friends told him that Paradox was stealing some of their cards and that's why he went looking for him, but since 4Kids never dubbed the 4th season of GX, we were left to assume that Jaden just faded off into space after his duel with Yubel. But here he is, back on Earth with an inexplicably sexier design, Professor Banner's cat follows him around, and Yubel's spirit is inside him. It makes sense if you saw the 4th season, but we didn't know it even existed, so what the hell?
Looking back, I kinda wish Paradox's plan went through, because if he were to wipe out duel monsters for good, then we wouldn't have gotten shows like Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal.
This was where my interest in the anime really started lessening. I only ever saw the first 2 episodes of this show, and it just did nothing for me. I didn't like the tone, the concept was a bit bland, and while I liked how the main character was more of a lackluster duelist than someone like Yugi or Yusei, Yuma was so annoying that he made Gurgi from the Black Cauldron look like Ned from Spider-Man Homecoming. In recent years, I've been hearing more good things about it, so maybe it got better over time and I just missed out on it. But those first 2 episodes were really hard for me to watch, so I don't think I'll ever go back. Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 didn't really do much for me either. Again, I've only seen the first episode, but even from only watching that, at least it was easier to get through than Zexal's first 2. The idea of dueling being treated like stage performances was kinda neat, and while Yuya was still a little annoying, I never felt the need to strangle him like with Yuma. But this was still when Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows were being targeted primarily to kids, and I wasn't part of that demographic anymore, so I never felt the need to watch the whole show. I wouldn't really want to catch up with any of the new shows again until Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains premiered. I made it up to around episode 15 of the Japanese version before my schedule decided that it wanted to eat up more of my time, But so far, I thought it was way better than the last two shows. It goes back to a more serious tone, the focus on virtual reality made for some pretty fascinating ideas, and Yusaku is a great protagonist. If I can get around to finding episodes of the English dub without having to move to Canada, I'd really like to keep watching this to see where it goes.
Let's go back in time a bit to my freshman year of high school. I still have all my old cards, but my passion for Yu-Gi-Oh! Is at its all-time lowest. Then, over Thanksgiving break, we went to go visit our extended family. And while we were there, I overheard my sisters watching something on YouTube with my cousins. When I went to go see what it was, it turned out to be an episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series. While not part of the official Yu-Gi-Oh! Canon, I felt it was important for me to bring it up, since I have this to thank for reigniting my interest in the franchise.
The concept of an abridged series is nothing groundbreaking these days, but Martin Billany, aka Little Karibo, was one of the first to make it popular with Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged. It's basically a parody of the original anime, telling the same stories but with a more comedic take on the characters. It makes fun of every single aspect of the show, from plot holes to 4Kids dialogue. It references other movies and shows, particularly Adult Swim shows, and its impact on the community was so massive, it was even referenced by some of the voice actors.
Actually, I like to refer to it as card games on motorcycles.
As it went on, the Abridged series went from clever satire to a celebration of everything Yu-Gi-Oh! It still pokes fun at the series, but it also serves as a reminder of what made it so super special awesome in the first place. Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged made me laugh at my childhood and helped me recapture my childhood, and with the 5th and final season starting later this year, I'll bet it's gonna be bittersweet for a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans. Little Karibo, you're an absolute legend. And please tell me you're gonna do Dark Side of Dimensions next. Oh man, this movie. If you've seen my Quick Smash episode on it, you'll know how much I enjoyed it, especially as an old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan. It was epic, it was silly, it was dark, it was corny, it was everything I loved about the original series cranked up to
9,000!
Oh, silly me, that's the wrong anime.
The best part was getting to see it in the theater with a whole bunch of other fans. We were cheering and shouting jokes at the screen like it was nobody's business, and being in that environment was an incredible experience. Times like that are what I have Yu-Gi-Oh! To thank for. I met some of my closest friends both in person and over the internet because of it. Brief encounters I had with other people were made extra special just by playing a few rounds of the card game. Where I've lived, it hasn't been very common to find other Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans to share my enthusiasm with, but it's even more valuable when I do find them, because like how the characters on the show cherish the friendships they've created, Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans value the bonds they've been able to create.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Is responsible for some of my best childhood memories, and no matter how much older I get, I know it'll still be a part of me. But capsule monsters can rot in a stinky old hole. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go figure out what Pot of Greed does. Alright, let's see. Well, what in the name of Ra is that supposed to mean? This card is way too confusing for its own good, and you do not belong in this house. Summon